Hello everybody, and welcome back to Cam Critiques. I've been a fan of the Xenoblade series since it started, though each consecutive release has surprised me in some way. No Xenoblade is quite like the other. So, going into Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I loved the tone of Xenoblade 1, the exploration of Xenoblade X, and the combat of Xenoblade 2, though I have my issues with all of those games. And I've long hoped that, one day, Monolith Soft would be able to put out a title that excelled in all three areas. Luckily, with Xenoblade 3, that day has finally come. In many ways, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the peak of the series. While some fans may miss iconic elements of past titles, I believe Xenoblade 3 is Takahashi's best work yet. This is one of the best JRPGs of all time. As soon as I saw this game's first trailer, I was drawn into the story. In this world, every human must fight to survive. They're given 10 years max to live, and they spend that time in endless war. I've never seen a world set up quite like it, and I wanted to get to the bottom of the mystery as soon as I could. As a fan of prior Xenoblade titles, there was another wrinkle of mystery added to the lore of the world of Ionios. The war central to this game's world pits Kevis, a nation of characters who are part of the races of Xenoblade 1, such as the Hyentia, the Machina, and Hams, against Agnes, a nation of characters who are clearly Xenoblade 2's Orions, Gormati, and Blades. Both sides are even led by party members from past entries. You can even see landmarks from Xenoblade 1 and 2 present in this game's new locations. I wanted to uncover what this world's deal was, not just to solve the mysteries of the war and the short lifespans, but also to see how prior Xenoblade games were related. A good hook is worthless if the rest of the story doesn't deliver though. Luckily, Xenoblade 3 does not have this problem. I'm not going to dive into spoilers here. I think going in blind is the ideal way to experience this game. But I can say that this game provides a constant stream of plot twists, even if many are predictable. And I can also say that this game tells an interesting, poignant story with a great ending. This game doesn't have as much of a sci-fi twinge as prior entries, and it goes for something a little more allegorical than usual for the series, but it is really well executed overall, so I can't complain. One thing that keeps the story so entertaining throughout is the fantastic cast. Every character has depth. The arcs are a lot more nuanced than I expected. They're distinct, they bounce off each other well, and they're just super fun to watch. Of the main six, Senna is easily the worst, but she's still better than the majority of party members from Xenoblade 1 or Xenoblade 2. This is one of the best parties I've seen in JRPG in recent years. There are a few minor problems with the story in my opinion, but they're far from deal breakers. The big one is that I felt the game ended without answering a few lingering questions I had. Though none were central to the main plot, so I wasn't too bothered. Hopefully the upcoming expansion delves further into them. I also felt like some things weren't explained as well as they could have been. I really can't go into examples without spoiling key plot moments, but there were a few times where the party did something and I wasn't 100% sure what the result would be until it happened, when it felt like I was really supposed to know ahead of time. Still, this game tells an interesting, meaningful story driven by a very dynamic, balanced cast. It's not flawless, but it's a joy to follow throughout. However, to me, the gameplay of Xenoblade 3 may stand out even more than its narrative. Both the combat system and the exploration are excellent. Even the side content is fantastic. I wasn't a huge fan of combat in the first Xenoblade Chronicles game, but it's one area where I feel the series has consistently improved across each entry. After Xenoblade Chronicles 2 nearly perfected the combat system the series was known for, I wasn't sure where Monolith Soft could go for this game. However, they made a lot of smart changes that make the combat more engaging than ever before. The way you fight in this game is pretty different from past entries, but it's still distinctly Xenoblade. You no longer control one character in each battle here. Instead, you can switch between all 6 party members. Nobody's ever in reserve or fully AI controlled. Everything is in your hands. In prior Xenoblade games, a decent chunk of time is always spent waiting for your arts, the primary method of attack, to charge. In this game, when you run out of arts on one character, you can just switch to the next. There's always something you can be doing. This helps make the combat super frantic and fast-paced, though its strategic core still shines. Another way this game keeps its combat fresh is with its super robust class system. In this game, instead of getting blades from a weird gacha system like you did in 2, you get heroes by doing the requisite quests. You can pretty much always fight with one of your AI-controlled heroes, but more importantly, when you unlock a hero, you unlock the class to be used by your main party. There were well over 20 entirely unique classes, with vastly different movesets and characteristics. Not only does this add a lot of strategic depth, but it also keeps the gameplay from growing repetitive. you'll never be fighting with one moveset, or even one set of 6 movesets, for too long. The main gimmick added to the combat for this game is the Ouroboros forms. 2 of your party members can fuse into one superpowered being, though only for a limited time. Using these forms is very satisfying. Their power is quite tangible, and they can get you out of a lot of tight situations. I was able to escape a lot more close calls than I could in prior games thanks to the Ouroboros forms, which is always a thrill. There are a lot of smaller changes made to the combat as well. Chain attacks are still here, but they require a little more strategy than before, and they're a lot more involved. Though I will admit, they can grow tedious with how long one takes to fully execute. Thankfully, the other tweaks don't have any such drawbacks. Instead of focusing on weird quick-time events, the combat system here is built more around positioning, which I much prefer. Buffs are often cast in the form of fields you have to stand in for them to apply, and you even have a great feeling dash you can use to get around quickly in battle. Xenoblade 1 had arts charge and a timer, while Xenoblade 2 had arts charge with each auto attack you landed. Xenoblade 3 has both. At first I wasn't sure how I felt about this. I feel like Xenoblade 2's method of art charging is just better. It gives you more control. But, soon after the game starts, each character gets to wield a set of each type of art. This lets characters effectively charge up their arts no matter what situation they're in. Having a backup set of timer charged arts for healers was much appreciated. Overall, the combat here is genuinely some of the best combat I've experienced in an RPG. It's fun, it's strategic, it's varied, it's fast paced, it's frantic, it's even super cool to look at. The animations do not disappoint. It deviates from Xenoblade 2's combat in all the right ways, allowing it to have its own identity and stand on equal footing. But as great as the combat is, the exploration might be even better. Exploration in Xenoblade games is somewhat hit or miss. They're always packed with breathtaking landscapes, though navigating them is often a chore. In my opinion, Xenoblade 1 has far too much empty space, and everything surrounding Xenoblade 2's field skill system greatly hinders that game's exploration. But in Xenoblade 3, I happily spent my time exploring each and every area thoroughly whenever I encountered it. Xenoblade 3's areas are still massive in scope, but I never found huge chunks of underutilized space. Exploring grants you constant rewards, and each area is packed to the brim with variety. Regions often contain multiple biomes, all packed with tons of secrets hidden within, cool caves to delve into, and interesting paths to traverse. Speaking of traversal, that's something that Xenoblade 3 handles really well. There are certain heroes that grant you traversal abilities, which allow you to reach new locations, and once you have them, they're there for good. No awkward hero shuffling, which you had to do with your blades in Xenoblade 2. The new traversal mechanics can also look pretty neat. Rail grinding is always a great addition to any game. Though honestly, what I enjoyed most about exploring in this game was all the callbacks to past entries. Regions are often weird mishmashes of areas from both Xenoblade 1 and 2, or reinterpretations of old areas, and they left me in awe more often than not. Pretty much every new area in the second half of this game took my breath away. Getting around in Xenoblade 3 is just a blast for so many reasons, not least of which is the fantastic side content here. The vast majority of the fetch quests are relegated to a menu option. When you're in the overworld, you're typically doing quests with named characters that have fleshed out relationships that actually add to the story. The hero quests in particular are exceptional. Some are vital to understanding the arcs of even main party members, but just about all of them are really entertaining and super polished, with their own fully voiced, specially animated cutscenes. The quests are so enjoyable that, even after beating the story, I found myself regularly going back to learn more about the world of Ionios and its inhabitants. Xenoblade is known for its affinity chart and related upgrades, detailing the relationships held by each and every character present, down to the most minor of NPCs, and encouraging you to learn more about them. And it's at its best here. It's just as fleshed out as it was in past entries, though the chart itself is easier to access and navigate than ever. And with side quests being as good as they are, I actually had fun improving my affinity with each and every town, or colony in this game. That is one minor issue I have with this game. I wish the colonies had more variety. I missed the lavish towns seen all throughout Xenoblade Chronicles 2. However, all the colonies are still distinct enough to be recognizable, and I think the sacrifice of fancy towns was a worthy one for the creation of such a fascinating world. A key part of why the world of Ionios is so fascinating is this game's fantastic visuals. Xenoblade has always had great art design, though both 1 and 2 feel massively held back by their hardware. Luckily with 3, it seems Monolith Soft has learned how to push the Switch to its absolute limits, because this game is gorgeous. Resolution and render distance are both considerably higher than they were in Xenoblade 2, and performance is even improved. I'm a little shocked that they got a game this big that looks this good to run on the Switch at all. The aesthetic is also helped by the game's great soundtrack. Honestly, I think this is the worst soundtrack in the series. None of the area themes are all that memorable, and a lot of the great battle themes get cut off before they hit their climax. Some of the cutscene tracks are underused too. However, this is still easily the best soundtrack I've heard this year. Every Xenoblade soundtrack is amazing, so calling it the worst among them isn't saying anything too damning. There is still a plethora of amazing new themes that I'll be adding to my work playlists, and some new tracks I've been humming over the past couple weeks. Ultimately, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is not a flawless game. The story is arguably a bit messy, the soundtrack is arguably a bit weak, and I know the combat isn't clicking with everybody. But this is undeniably a game with a lot of heart. From start to finish, and even beyond, I was enthralled by this game's world and narrative. The cast here is one of the greatest I've seen in gaming, and there is some moments in this story that I'll never forget. I genuinely adored just about everything here, from its gameplay to its aesthetic to its narrative. So in my mind, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is absolutely a masterpiece.